It's really straightforward. The Edmonton Oilers are in trouble.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Loser Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zerars. I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, we're going to be walking through the 3-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres on Monday night and why I feel like it's the start of a trend in the wrong direction. And it might be the most straightforward, distilled version of why the Oilers have struggled over the last handful of weeks, and gets back to our working theory as of late that anything that can go wrong will go wrong when you're a team that's struggling with its confidence. So we're going to start with the game itself. We're going to move along to a conversation I have tentatively titled The Marriage of Effort, Structure, and Intent. And then in our final segment, we're going to talk about the week that's ahead and why, even though this feels like a deflating loss, it is not entirely over. For every it's so over, there's an equal and commiserate we're so back. And sitting here right now and looking over at the screen to my right and seeing Tage Thompson getting interviewed, I just feel that the Oilers are stuck right now as a team that is struggling with confidence, that is struggling with execution. And the Sabres are an atrocious hockey team. Let's just get that out of the way. They're in last place in the Eastern Conference. They're bottom 5 in even strength save percentage. They're bottom 10 in chances against, expected goals against, high danger chances against, and actual goals against. So with all of that working for you, as an Oilers team that has struggled to score for the better part of the last 2 or 3 weeks, this was as easy an opportunity as you're going to get in the National Hockey League. And as we discuss ad nauseum, there are no easy games in the NHL. No matter who you're playing, they are going to have enough guys where if they have opportunities, they're going to convert them. And Stuart Skinner did the Oilers no favor on that first goal. That big rebound was not something you wanted to see. He was extremely out of position. The Tage Thompson goal to make it 3-2, that was a great player making a really explosive play, and something the Oilers just haven't had enough of their own of lately. And when you look at the underlying numbers in relation to the game results, it's not the most surprising thing in the world. And we talk a lot about the value of underlying numbers and what they actually tell us. But when you look at the flow of this game, where the Sabres got out to a lead, they continued to play with a good... The Sabres played well enough in this game that the Oilers were on their heels for the great majority of it. And yes, I know it went back and forth. You had one goal. The problem is when you are chasing it the way the Oilers were for the majority of this game, it puts you in a position where your margin for error is significantly smaller. And in addition to that, the flow of the game starts to work against you, because in the first period, Buffalo outchanced Edmonton 22-17. In the second, 10-9. The third period, the one period the Sabres lost, they were playing with a lead or in a tie game for a good chunk of that. And the Oilers were unable to really break through. And one of the real telltale signs of a team that is struggling to break through offensively is when there is a big discrepancy between scoring chances and shots on goal. Because scoring chances that aren't turned into shots on goal, they're not getting through to the net. And that means they're coming from bad angles, they're getting blocked on the way in, or they're missing the net outright. And when you look at the discrepancy in the first period, 17 scoring chances, 11 shots on goal. Second period, 9 scoring chances, 6 shots on goal. Third period, most scoring chances the Oilers had in any period in this game, they had 19. They only got 8 of them on goal. that discrepancy tells you a lot about the quality of the offense the Oilers were able to generate in this game. And that's reflected when you go and look at the high danger. It's 10-10, it's even in the game, but 5-4, 2-3. Buffalo wins the first two periods, and then the third period ends up being 3-3. Excuse me, Edmonton wins the first, Buffalo wins the second, Buffalo ties in the third, and ultimately it comes out to 10-10 in terms of high danger chances. But you have that in conjunction with the expected goals, and that's where it really starts to fall apart. And I understand the frustration with Stuart Skinner. He's going to be a big topic in our second segment tonight. But at the same time, the Oilers scored 2 goals against a bottom 5 team in the entire NHL. And yes, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is an above-average goalie. The Sabres are talented. Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, Josh Norris, Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin. They've got a talented group that if you give them opportunities, and you think about the second Tage Thompson goal, where it's him and Bouchard in a mano-a-mano, and not only does Bouchard get handcuffed on the puck, he's slow to react. Thompson's a faster skater. He's bigger. He's stronger. It is about as impossible a situation for Bouchard to find himself in, and because his partner came close to his side of the ice because Wallman was on his side, they weren't able to really distribute the responsibility there. Wallman took himself out of the play, pinching up as early as he did, and that left Bouchard back to defend a 2-on-1, and the Sabres came down and scored on him. And again, when you are struggling the way the Oilers as a team are, it feels like everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And a player like Evan Bouchard, who is your third most important player on this team, when he's having mistakes like that, that's really indicative of a group that's lacking confidence, that doesn't seem to have the means to find their way out of the rut they're in. And I think that's my big takeaway from this game. And it's one of the real differentiation points between a good team, an average team, and a bad team. A good team, even if the underlying results aren't great, even if the other team controls a majority of possession, they find a way because they're a good team. There's a level of resilience, there's a level of situational awareness and opportunistic behavior that puts you in a position to capitalize on the mistakes that people make. And instead, the Oilers they're profiling more as an average team, and I would venture to say they're closer to an average team right now than they are a good team. And that's not disqualifying. Good teams have bad runs, but we're going on 4.5, 5 weeks now of the Oilers really struggling to find their game, finding a way to control the flow of play, finding a way to convert scoring chances into goals. And you go and look through their last 5-10 games, and really quickly you start to get a greater picture of the problem at hand here. Sure, they're not scoring at a terrible clip. 31 goals in 10 games, 3.1 per game isn't atrocious. It's not great. But then you look at the goals against, and you see 42 goals against in their last 10 on pretty mediocre goaltending. And the crazy thing, and I want to do the math on this right now for you before we go to break and go to our next segment. The Oilers are scoring on 41% of their power plays over the last 10 games, and they're still being outscored by 11. If you are scoring on 41% of your power plays and you are still being outscored by 11 goals, that tells me your defense and your goaltending haven't been doing enough. And for the better part of the last week, I should say 2 weeks, 3.1 goals per game when you're conceding 4.2. That's not even close. That is showing a discernible gap. You think about some of the losses in there. 7-3 to Washington, 6-3 to Philadelphia, 4-1 to Tampa Bay, 6-2 to Anaheim. Those are brutal losses, and it's really going to start to, for lack of a better word, it starts to snowball on you. And even if you're not a good team, even if you are a good team, you can be derailed by funks like this. There are plenty of teams that have experienced a dry spell like this that have put them through the ringer, and it's made them not reach their potential. And I think at this point, and we'll wrap here because we're running long on our first segment, I've been talking about all season long that you got to make incremental progress. You want to stay pretty close to a base equilibrium. You're not too high, you're not too low, so that you can keep building over the course of the season. And right now, it feels like the Oilers are a long way away from that midpoint equilibrium of not being too high, too low. Right now, they are fully walking on eggshells. But that will do it for our first segment. When we return, we're going to talk about the marriage between effort, between intent, and structure, coming up right after this on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, where you've got your team covered every day. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. They have options for everybody, no matter what your dietary goals, and the convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Loser Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, sitting here in the aftermath of a 3-2 loss to a bad Sabres team. And in the National Hockey League, no one is a gimme. There are no layups in the National Hockey League. There are too many talented players, even on the bad teams, to go into a game with the mindset of, we don't even need to play that well to get this done. You give a team like Buffalo, for as lowly as they are, enough chances, they're going to break through, and they're going to put you in an unfortunate and a difficult situation. And watching the Oilers struggle to find that third goal down the backstretch of the third period was agonizing, because you knew anytime Connor and Leon weren't out there, they didn't have a chance. And that's the peril of this roster construction. When you are chasing the game and you need to put Connor with Leon, you've defanged the trickle-down effect that your offense is supposed to have. You have put your bottom six in a disadvantageous position that they're not going to be make up, because Leon and Connor are the caliber of players that can operate outside of structure and kind of drag guys along, for lack of a better expression, where if the game is up in the balance and it's back and forth and you're not sure who's going to prevail, those two guys are dynamic enough of players. When it's in terms of Connor, it's his skating and his facilitating. In terms of Leon, it's his facilitating and his chance creation and his shot. When you have those guys out there at the same time, no one else in their lineup plays with the degree of dynamism requisite with being able to take over a game, to be able to elevate their line mates. And that's why I have repeated over and over again this year, it is outright imperative that if the Oilers are going to go very far come playoff time, that they have enough depth to support Connor and Leon on separate lines. That way, they can control upwards of half of the game. When you add up Connor's 5-on-5 minutes, Leon's 5-on-5 minutes, and then the power play time where they overlap, if you have the capacity to play them separately, you can control almost half of the game with at least one, if not both of them on the ice. And that's really your end goal when you have these superstar players. Sure, is there something to be gained by playing them on the same line when you're chasing a goal and you need one? Yes, absolutely. I have no problem with the Oilers going to this down a goal late. The trickle-down effect of that, though, is it requires rigid structure and almost outright perfection from the bottom 9 forward group. And perfection is a very high standard, and it's put the Oilers continuously in these difficult situations where all teams got to do when they're playing Edmonton is survive the Connor and Leon minutes. And then against the other 9 forwards, it's not smooth sailing, but it's significantly easier to withstand the offensive attack. And you watched Buffalo do that tonight. And Buffalo, again, is not a good defensive team. I'm going to read you the stats again. 8th in goals against, 7th in expected goals against, 8th in high danger chances against, 6th in high, on ice save percentage, and 17th in chances against. Those are all bottom 10 except for chances against, and 17th is average. So when you keep those two things in mind, you add those two pictures together, the fact the Oilers could not score, could not mount more than 2 goals, they only had 1 at even strength. You got 1 even strength goal against a bottom 5 team in the entire NHL. And yes, again, Pekka Luukkonen is very good. I have no problem with admitting that. I had him 5th on my Vezina ballot for last season, how impressed I was with his game on a bad Buffalo team. But with all of that said, the Oilers were waiting and waiting and waiting. And sure, they hit a couple posts. They were in a difficult situation where the game wasn't coming to them, and they couldn't find a way to get that game-tying goal. That's the reality of sports. You can play really well. You can execute about as well as you can, close to your maximum output. And if the puck doesn't go in, it doesn't ultimately matter. And again, we talked about the context of that third period, where it was the one period the Oilers had a real decisive control in possession. And that was largely because the Sabres kept them to the outside. The non-Connor Leon minutes were a slog to get through down the back stretch. I'm clicking on over here to look at natural stat trick, and every Oilers line combination was over 50% on scoring chances. But of course, they had one line that contributed a 5-on-5 goal. So even if you did have that zone time, and the Oilers did have a decent chunk of zone time in spite of that, the problem is down the backstretch of this game, when you look at things like expected goals and high danger chances for and against, the guys you needed to contribute in this game weren't really able to do that. Connor Leon and Hyman had 92% of the expected goals in this game, and they didn't get the puck in the net once at 5-on-5. And that really puts you in a situation where if you're big guns, if you load up a line with as much talent as you possibly can, can't score a goal, you don't have a chance, because you're not expecting your bottom 6. You're not expecting Max Jones or Henrique or Corey Perry, Connor Brown, Podkolzin, Jeff Skinner. You're not expecting any of those guys to give you a goal. It would be wholly unrealistic to say the expectation is those guys are going to find a way to bail you out. This team is entirely oriented around its star players making plays when the chips are down. And tonight, the Oilers' star players did not play badly, but when you try and find that balance to mitigate the defensive issues and the goaltending issues, you have a pretty high bar to clear. And if the bar is so high that Connor and Leon are struggling to meet that bar against the Buffalo Sabres, I think you have real foundational questions. I think you have real foundational questions about the quality of your lineup if Connor and Leon, going as crazy as they did tonight, couldn't get you a single goal and you lost to a bottom 5 team in the entire NHL. That feels like a combination of both results and logic that put you in a difficult position if you're Chris Knobloch, if you're Stan Bowman, because these are the chips you have. You might get Trent Frederick and Evander Kane a month from now, but if you're limping into the playoffs after playing sub 500 hockey for a month straight and you only get in by virtue of the Western Conference's bottom half being bad, no one's going to feel good about that. No one's going to have high expectations for the Oilers. Coming into the year, the Oilers were the betting favorite to win the Stanley Cup. They've since been passed by a handful of teams. But you think about the landscape of the Western Conference at large. Dallas added Mikko Rantanen. Colorado added Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle. Vegas added Riley Smith and has been lurking all year. Winnipeg is better than they were last year. That is a whole lot to consider in relation to the Oilers' recent run of form. We are going to take one final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. I'm going to offer you some thoughts going into a week against the 3 New York teams right after this. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of the daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller, longer. Personally, I'm a big fan of the no-shell variety. They're the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days, whether I'm at my desk working on the show, on a road trip, or just trying to get a quick hit of protein to hit my daily macros. They're a solid go-to. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Loser Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I don't know if we're going to keep that or not, saying the loser day of the week like we would for a winner day of the week. I find it amusing. It's definitely making me laugh every time I say it. Let me know if you're in on referring to the team as losers after they lose on the show, because that was a frustrating loss. And I sit here about an hour after the game ended feeling very disappointed. And there's plenty of time left for the Oilers to turn their season around. They are not in dire straits. They could be far worse off than they are right now. They've still got a 3-point cushion on the LA Kings. They've played 2 more games than the LA Kings, which may become an issue later down the road. But when you sit here and think about this, the Oilers have gotten away with pretty subpar hockey for quite a while now, if we're going to be fair. If you go back to the 1st of February, in that window, the Oilers have played 12 games since February 1st. Their record in those games is 5-7-0. So if we were to do the math there, of 24 potential standings points, they've recorded 10 standings points. 10 divided by 24 is 4.16. So we'll round up, get the camera in focus. There we go. Yeah. 4.16, which rounds up to 4.2. And look, man, it's early. There's a lot of time for them to fix their issues. They've still got 18 regular season games remaining, which can feel like an eternity based on how you feel. That can be a good eternity or it could be a bad eternity. If you think the Oilers are in a death spiral that's going to see them ultimately fall down to one of the wild card spots, or even worse, maybe miss the playoffs altogether, then this might feel like the longest month and change of your entire life. Or if you're optimistic and you just think this is a bad funk, that as soon as Connor goes on a heater, or Leon or Bush, or as soon as Stuart Skinner starts to find a way to be a league average goaltender again, you might feel a lot more optimistic about the trajectory of the team. And there's no way to know until we play the games. And that's really the conundrum here. You're going into the New York swing. You get to play the Devils, the Islanders, and the Rangers. 2 of those teams are not currently in playoff spots. The Islanders are the 4th worst team in the entire Eastern Conference. They are 29, 27, and 7. They play the Oilers on Friday. The Devils play the Oilers on Thursday. My plan is to be in attendance. I look forward to seeing the Oilers. The Jets played the Devils last Friday, and I was in the building and I saw the Jets hang a 6 spot on the Devils, and the Devils really struggling. No Jack Hughes, no Dougie Hamilton, a lot of guys not really sure how to make plays. The Rangers conceded a disgusting amount of goals over the weekend against Columbus and Ottawa. The Islanders have been struggling defensively for a good chunk of this season. This is as close as you are going to get to a get-right road trip. And you said that coming into the week thinking, oh, they get to play Buffalo, the Rangers, the Devils, and the Islanders in a 4-game window. Only one of those teams is in a playoff spot. Only 2 of those teams are like decent-ish. And we're using decent-ish very loosely if we're considering the Rangers decent. And so far, they've lost in very, very uninspiring fashion to the Buffalo Sabres in a game where, yeah, they had a little more of the puck, but you only scored 2. You only scored 1 5-on-5 goal. And now you're going to play a Devils team that's reeling. The Devils are a team that's missing its best player in Jack Hughes. missing its best defenseman in Dougie Hamilton. Jacob Markstrom recently returned from a serious lower body injury that knocked him out for several weeks, and the Devils are just trying to stave off any fatal wounds. The Devils are just trying to make the playoffs, and they are in a desperation mode. And I wouldn't say the Oilers are there yet, but another week or two of playing the way the Oilers have, and we're not going to be having too dissimilar conversation about the Oilers as we are about the Devils right now. The Devils are dealing with injury problems. The Oilers, there's no major injuries here. Yeah, Ekholm is important. He's not as important to the Oilers as Jack Hughes is to the Devils. Ditto Dougie Hamilton and Matthias Ekholm. Again, I think Ekholm is he's probably their fifth or sixth most important player on the entire team. Jack Hughes is the Devils' engine. When you generate zone entries at that rate on that consistent of a basis, that opens up so much more for the rest of your team, both for your defensemen because their responsibilities are a little bit less, for the rest of the forwards on that line because Jack creates the zone entry. And this is as close as you're going to get to a full-on get-right trip. The Oilers have time. 18 regular season games is plenty of time to work out these kinks. But you keep saying that, and eventually you start to run out of games. It's like the semester-long project in college. You get the full 12 weeks of the semester, and really quickly, it's the 9th week of the semester, and all you've done is submit your proposal. You've done none of the legwork. You've done none of the research. You've done none of the practical work, and really quickly, you are going to have to dial in and get 8-9 weeks worth of work done in 3 weeks. It's not impossible. I can speak to truth to power. I've been there. It happens. You lose track of time. You get a little too overconfident in your own abilities, and you start kicking the can down the road, and eventually the project comes due. And the Oilers have time to get this project in. But it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck mentality here. They are going to need everybody to play a little bit better. Now, some guys have a little bit more to give than others, and that's part of being on a team. The Oilers desperately need to find a way to make Stuart Skinner's life as easy as humanly possible. And he didn't have to do a lot tonight, but the bar for Stuart Skinner is very low. He doesn't even need to be good. As long as Stuart Skinner is not actively bad, that should be enough against the Rangers, Islanders, and Devils. The Islanders are a Frankenstein monster of roster parts. The Rangers are the single most underperforming team in the entire NHL, and the Devils are missing their two most important players to injury. You have a week set up to get you heading in the right direction. Now, it's incumbent upon you as the Edmonton Oilers to take this opportunity, to capitalize on it, come out of the weekend with at least 5 out of the 6 points, and we start next week talking about it seems like they've turned a corner, but we need to play more games before they eventually turn that corner. And we still got plenty of time to go, but that will do it for today's Loser Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank everyone who made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL, covering all of the biggest stories across the league with the local expertise from Locked On that you love. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow's show, we're going to do a deep dive on Jake Wallman, so be sure to not miss out. I will see you guys then. Until then, let's go Oilers.